Nice to see you. See you now. Where are we going to start? Just wandering up and down. Hey Tish. Welcome everyone. Okay, let's get my little spectacles on. Get all the cabling going here. As I said, I feel like some kind of android with all these cables coming in and out of me. Not me particularly, but you know what I mean. Hello, Jenny. Hi, Susan. Hello, Carol. Hanel in Finland. Welcome. Good to see you all. Lovely. We've got a good connection at the moment. I've had a little wander around today. It's a bit drizzly. It's not too bad. But at some point we may drop in signal. We'll see. I'll keep an eye on it because I can see it on my screen exactly how the signal's going. Hopefully the sound's okay. I think my mic is working well. All right. Good sound. Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Lovely. We'll just wait another couple of minutes for everyone to appear. All right. Wherever they are in the way, it's a bit of a trek from where I live. It's not too bad. It'll be about an hour and 15 to get here. And yeah, the connection's already dropping, but that's okay. It's not too bad. We can deal with that. We can deal with half a connection. Okay. Just walking around checking the signal out. Ciao, Luigi. Hello, everyone. It might be early in the morning for some of you. Might be quite late at night, but I hope you'll enjoy where we are today for about half an hour or so. You may hear a little noise. I'm just sticking something into the bottom of my gimbal. There we go, just for a bit of stabilizing. We've got about a minute and a half. Anyone have anything to share before we start? Any interesting things that have happened to you in the last 12 hours or so? Hi, Satyam. Nice to see you. We're just wandering up and down roads at the moment. I'm just working out a bit of signal work, just making sure that this is all calibrated and stabilized. And then we'll start just over half a minute. Jenny is going to see Leopoldstadt later. From Stockholm, it is fantastic. Found a box underneath two seats, actually, drawn in 2019, and they restored the entire building, and it cost Andrew Lloyd Webber 70 million. And I managed to nab two seats, theatre seats from Drury Lane, and they're in the corner of my lounge. But they flip up, as you know, theatre seats do, like old cinema seats. But hidden behind one of the flipped up seats was a nice box of chocolates. Here we are, Joanna, David, Barbara, lovely to meet you, and Izzy. I'm Gerard, Gerhard, and Reason. We may have the odd connection issue on the way round, but if I see it happening, I will wander somewhere else. So this is going to be a half-hour walk, and we're in an area called Richmond, in Richmond upon Thames. If you know the area, don't tell everyone everything. Let me do that. Some of you may never have been here. Some of you may live here. I may see some of you on the road as I'm wandering. But we're going to have a little wander now around this great area, Richmond upon Thames. Now, it's a big town. Unfortunately, we can't get round all of it because I'd have to be on a bike like one of the Amsterdam guys, or I'd have to drive around. So we're going to walk and see as much as we can, and we're going to eventually end up near the river. But the first stop, just to get a sense of where we are, we're in Richmond Green. I'm breaking up a little bit. I think we're okay now. And welcome, Scotland. This is the Richmond Theatre, designed by the architect Frank Matcham, who made close to 100 theatres in and around the country. This one's from 1899, and a lot of people think it's the nicest of all of them. Charlie Chaplin and Stan Laurel played here in the early days. Let's get a view from the front. Yeah, so we're on the green. We're not actually on the main road. We're behind Richmond Town Centre. This is where the entrance is. So it was originally built for the aristocracy that lived in this area. But it is a beautiful theatre. And it's one of those touring theatres. So some of you may know that I've been an actor for 25 years. And every now and then when you get a play, if it goes on tour around the country, this is a bit of inside info. Anywhere that's 25 miles or more from where you live, they pay you subsistence. So they pay you accommodation and travel. And if it's 24 miles, they don't. So it has to be 25 miles or more. By the way, we're looking at the signs for what is going on here. Animal Farm, George Orwell, directed by Robert Icke. Robert Icke directed me in a play called 1984 in the West End. And there we have Catch Me If You Can, so not the Spielberg movie, but a thriller starring, oh my goodness, Bobby Ewing, Patrick Duffy. Isn't that fantastic? And a man called Gray O'Brien. So one of those people with two surnames. So yeah, if it's 25 miles or more, they pay you. They pay maybe a couple of £100 a week extra so you can get accommodation. And I played at Richmond Theatre many years ago, and it's 26 miles from where I live. And they had to pay it, but it was easy because I could just park in the green and drive home in about an hour every night, and I got that extra money. So normally they work it out. They have a company manager and an accounts team that work out where everyone lives. So sometimes it's not just about how good you are for the job, but in a touring production, it's about how local you are. So don't think it's always about talent. If it were, well, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be in every show in town. And this is Richmond Green here. So a lot of people in the town think that this is the real treasure. And it was the site of jousting and archery in the 15th and 16th century, when all the Tudor kings and queens stayed in this area. And it remains part of the Crown Estate, so it's still considered a royal park. And it has a big, proud history of fairs and community celebrations in the local area. Cricket especially. This is one of the first places where cricket was played. Oh, this is something I saw earlier, which I didn't see on my walk yesterday. This is named Gothic House. So it's a facade. It's not really Gothic, but it looks Gothic. But they've named it Gothic House, which is quite good. So again, the signal might be dropping a bit, but we'll do our best as we wander around. Hopefully you can still hear and see a bit. So this town, Richmond, we're about 8 miles, or about 13 kilometres from Charing Cross, where all distances in London are measured from. And the town's called Richmond, and the borough or district is named Richmond upon Thames, and it's now in the county of what we call Greater London. So if you know from any of my tours or any other London tours, or just in general, you might know this. London was a very small area 400 or 500 years ago on the north bank of the river with a wall around it, which was originally built by the Romans, and now it's stretched out. So you have the city with a capital C of London, and then you have London itself, which we consider the West End, Westminster, Camden, and then you have Greater London, which includes parts of boroughs like Kent and Surrey and Richmond upon Thames. There are 32 boroughs in London now, but years ago, these boroughs were in places like Essex and Surrey. So the mapping has changed quite a bit of England, but the geography has not changed as much. One thing that is for certain is a lot of the royal parks in London have had roads put through them or posh residences. They've been reclaimed a bit, but originally the royal parks in London were one hunting ground. The one thing that hasn't changed is the river, and we're going to see a bit of that in a while. But I just wanted to show you one of these lanes. This is one of the first ever gelato ice cream emporiums in London. Daniele at the green. Just trying my Italian accent. Daniele on the green. Thank you very much. I'm an actor. I'm allowed to do accents. It's not offensive. I have a card. So there are many areas in London, of course, we've wandered around them that are quite affluent, but this is the most well-off, and I'm sure you know. Areas like Barnes and East Molesey, Ham, Kew, Strawberry Hill, Mortlake, Teddington, Twickenham. If you say to anyone who knows England, or knows London especially, that you live in one of these areas, they'll say, ooh, and Sheen is another one. But this town is Richmond, and in the 1400s, the town itself was known as Sheen. S-H-E-N-E. But there is an area called Sheen now, which is S-H-E-E-N. So for some reason, they turned the letters round over the years. King Henry VII came to power, and in 1501, he founded a palace in this area. And as we wander around, I'm just talking about the history, but showing you some of these lovely lanes as we wander, if that's okay. So it's kind of like a lecture with nice views. Yeah, so he originally was the Earl of Richmond in North Yorkshire. And this area was and the green or light green duck egg restaurant. It's not duck egg, but it's light green, which are, yeah. A few people have said losing the signal, but that's okay. We're getting it back gradually. I hope some of you can still hear. It's sort of fluctuating. There you go. So it's L'Assaggino, which is a restaurant, an Italian restaurant with only 12 covers, 12 seats. People have coffee in here as well, but I just want to show you that is inside. It's very, very small. My lounge is almost the same size as La Segina. Okay, let's continue on. Yeah, because we're down a little alleyway, we haven't got as much signal, but that will soon improve. Now, in this area, Queen Elizabeth did stay, and she would have stayed at Richmond Palace, and she actually died there in 1603. Let's walk up to the main road, and hopefully the signal will be better. Phew. When you see a bad signal, when it goes down to 1 out of 5, and then when it goes red and it says reconnecting, it's a guide's nightmare. This is the Open Book, an old bookshop. It is lovely. And it used to be the home of a newspaper, the Richmond and Twickenham Times. And I worked there when I came out of theatre school in the advertising department. And I lived in southeast London, but I had to come here southwest. So it was a bit of a trek every day, but now it's a bookshop, the Open Book. We're just going to stop up here at a pub called the Old Ship. A lot of the pubs in this area, if they're not named after things that happened here, like the Cricketers is one of the pubs in the area, they're named after something river related, because there are many boats along the river and many moors and pubs like the Old Ship. So this was a place where stage coaches and people travelling from Hampton Court, all the hoity-toity people, the royalty, the aristocracy, the dignitaries would stop here, their stage coaches, when they were on the way to Westminster or Whitehall. So it's been there since at least 1735, and it's been a Young's pub, the Ram Brewery in Wandsworth, since 1869. Okay, let's cross over. So the signal seems to be low, but it still seems like I've got a signal. How are we sounding? Brilliant. Thank you, Luigi. Thank you, Tish. I'm getting some thumbs up. Now, the palace itself is no longer here. Most of it had gone by the 1770s, and this area became agricultural. The only bridge in the area was further along west, and I'm sure you'll know that Kingston Bridge and London Bridge were so far apart, nearly 16 miles apart, that the only other way of crossing the river was a ferryman. And they decided to build a bridge here in the 1770s. And strangely, it's called Richmond Bridge. It's the oldest surviving bridge that crosses the river. And it's only been changed slightly over the years. We walk down to the river. Again, the signal, but we've still got the signal, which is the main thing. And as we come down to the river, the signal should get a bit better. Strange, isn't it? The most affluent area of London, and the signals are bad, but the buildings are so high and the lanes are so narrow that I suppose this can happen. Yeah, they're cobblestones. There's a couple of roads around here that get quite confusing. They're called Stones End, and it's where the cobblestones, which were the old paved roads, end. I know in France, if you go through the countryside, you go into a town and it's got the name of a town, and if you come out of the town, right at the town's exit, it's the same name with a red cross going through it. It's quite a simple way of doing it, isn't it? But here they call it Stones End. Then there's another one near the Globe called Bank End, where the bank side ends. If you know the Globe and some of my Shakespeare tours, where the Anchor pub is, just across the road is a sign called Bank End. This is the White Cross here, another Young's pub. Now, Young's are an enormous brewery, but they don't have too many pubs in the West End and in the city. Most of them are on the outskirts of London. The furthest one away is in Oxford, but we are now on the riverbank. And you might hear some birds making noise. And in the distance, you've got the bridge going to Kew and Kew Gardens. And this is the riverbank. So very different from our London river walks. This is the bridge, Richmond Bridge. The river's still quite tidal here. You can see swans down there, but it does flow, it does raise, it does lower. So along the river beyond, there's a high tide lock, which opened in the late 1800s, and it means that they can always make sure that there's a minimum depth to the river if boats are going through. And I think the minimum depth is about 2 meters, about 6.5 feet. Boats can go along without worrying. In this area, we talk about Henry VII, but before him, Edward II would have stayed in this area. Richard II made Sheen, as it was then known, his main residence. And there are quite a few unconfirmed reports that Shakespeare's acting company performed at Richmond Palace and in this area. There's nothing definite on the town. So technically, we're on the south bank, south of the river, but because of the way the river curls around this area, this nearest stretch of the water is actually south, so it can feel like we're north, if that makes sense. It's quite confusing. This is lovely, but I think I'm just going to go up and show us a monument to World War I, World War II soldiers. Because behind it, there's a beautiful old town hall. So the building right in the distance is the old town hall, which is now a library and some offices. There are some architects based in there as well. But in the 1890s, that was the town hall. And this monument saying Pro Patria, 1914 to 1918, also commemorates those lost during the Second World War. And these poppies would be made in the local area. All the remembrance poppies are made in Richmond. Now we've suddenly got a good signal again, which is something. Let's walk around. So a lot of these buildings are Georgian. So it has this classical look to the river. I know in the West End, it would have pretty much been quite grimy down in areas like the Strand, but they beautified that by building the Victoria Embankment. But this would have always been quite beautiful because it was home to a royal palace. The bridge is lovely from here, and on the other side of it is an area called Strawberry Hill, and that's still part of Richmond. So Richmond's the only borough in the country that has it on both sides of the river. Okay, let's see where we can go so that I don't get arrested. Can we go through there? I think we can go through Richmond Riverside Court. So, this is Richmond Riverside. As we walk through, it's a lovely court behind us. The town's home to about 20,000, and a lot of them say that the green is the real treasure, but I think the river is. And it's a mix of different styles of architecture, from Gothic, Regency, Classical, but this has an Italian piazza feel to it, a lovely fountain in the centre. A lot of the folks that are in here are solicitors. It is a lovely square, a kind of hidden square, and it has names like Hotham House, Bridge House, Palm Court. It's used for filming quite a lot. maybe walk back onto the main high street. We haven't really seen that yet. A lot of the side lanes have pretty much remained the same for a couple of 100 years, but we're going to try and wander up an area called Richmond Hill. It was Richmond where, in the 1620s, Charles I took his entire entourage, his entire court with him when there was an outbreak of the plague in London. This is the Odeon Cinema. There are two Odeon cinemas, but if you remember that we walked around the West End, if any of you have been with me, in 1930, the Cambridge Theatre opened, which had a sort of German expressionist / Art Deco look. All the cinemas then, from then on, for many years, were built in that design. And worldwide, there are quite a few picture houses, movie palaces, and it got away from the excesses of the variety theatres. It's quite stark, it's Portland stone, and inside it's very modern, but it does look like something from the 1930s on the outside. There you go. The police. They've got me. Again. To show you the bridge from this angle. Obviously there's traffic on it. Doesn't look so great, but it's quite interesting to be even further west than I was before. I do gradually go more west. I'll eventually end up in Ireland at some point if I continue to go west. But we're going to walk up Richmond Hill and we're going to try and get as far as we can to Richmond Park in the next 8 minutes. We'll do what we can. Okay, thank you very much. People are letting me go, which is really nice of them. Yeah, there are 21 miles, just over 30 kilometres of river in Richmond. And the park right at the top is 2,360 acres. It's about 9.5 square kilometres. It's originally for hunting and archery and so on. There are still thousands of deer which roam it. But it's now London's largest royal park. Sadly, I won't be able to go into it because we'll definitely lose the signal and it'll take us about 4 hours to walk around. So I would advise you, when you are in London, to come to Richmond, and Richmond Park in particular. Rent a bike, rent a car, stop off on the way. It's 60 times the size of Green Park. It's 5 times the size of Monaco, 3 times the size of Central Park, actually. And right at the top is where quite a few famous people live. Now, I'm sure you know many of them, but we don't need to list them all, but Tom Hardy, Richard E. Grant, David Attenborough has a house on Richmond Green, but I never saw him this morning. Attenborough says Richmond is his favourite place on earth. And he's been everywhere. J.M.W. Turner, Richard Brinsley Sheridan, the writer who wrote the famous play The Rivals, and Euston House. And Down House was then owned, many years later, by Mick Jagger and Jerry Hall. Jerry Hall still lives there. Gustav Holst, Peter Sallis, he was a great comedian and actor, and John Turner, ex-Prime Minister of Canada, was born here. David Garrick, the actor, lived here for many years, even though he was from Lichfield. He lived in Richmond, and in his garden he had a temple. It was basically decking, as we would call it now, but he put stone pillars up and he used it as a stage. It's quite nice, isn't it? He liked acting. It was his life. And for a lot of us, it's a job. It starts as your life, your hobby, your love. And then you become an actor and you find that most of the time you're not acting. So you have to find other hobbies. And in the early years of acting, that can be quite difficult. If you're not acting, it's tough going. And Greg on the chat has said, Lichfield is where I live. Lucky you, it's a beautiful part of the world. So as I said, it's the only borough that stretches across the river. It's called Richmond. So Richmond, rich, lowest amount of poverty in the area in London. And look at this beautiful building up here. We're up Richmond Hill. This is where the rich, les riches, live. That actress Celia Johnson lived just there. Celia Johnson, actress, born in that house. Brief encounter. Hey Thomas, somebody on the chat says they're from the Czech Republic. And this beautiful mansion here is actually a school now, an independent day school for girls. So it's one of those schools where it's probably about £8,000 a term. That's a term, that's a semester to be in there. If you've got the money, I suppose you want the best for your children. I don't want to be pointing my camera too long at the school. Again, the signal's quite low, but we're coming up to the top of Richmond Hill. Whew. It's quite a walk. Aaron and Patrick mentioned the other day, they walked up some steps and they asked me if I have problems when I'm guiding and I'm going up steps. And I just said, well, there's some pre-recorded stuff that I've done. Lying in bed at home appears. That's a joke. It's all live. So again, the connection is, it's okay. I just want us to get to the top of the hill so we can get a bit of a view. And it's one of the only protected views in the country. It's protected by an Act of Parliament. And it's of Ham and Petersham in the distance. All right. Now, although this looks like maybe it's full of not the nicest apartments, it's Richmond Hill Court. It's very expensive to live in this area. Any property is expensive. And parking, don't even get me started on parking. All right. These are the terrace gardens here. We should be able to get a view in the distance once we see that the trees are dispersing. As we come up, just past the white building in the centre, is where Jerry and Mick lived. And a lot of musicians live in this area as well. There were many studios based around here too. Richmond Hill. Okay. The reason actors lived here was because they felt they didn't want to live in the centre of London. And a lot of them travelled by horses and carriages. It was in the days before matinee shows, so they could always arrive in the evening for a performance. Nowadays, if you do live quite far out, sometimes you need to be in by 11 o'clock or midday to do an afternoon performance. But matinees only started in the 1800s, really. And then people like John Gielgud, these nomadic actors, didn't even have homes, and they would go to places like Drury Lane or the Theatre Royal, Haymarket, and they would live in the dressing rooms. So the number one dressing room at Drury Lane, John Gielgud lived there when he was performing. So you can see in the distance a view of the river, which snakes around Richmond and the area of Ham and Petersham. So I hope that was worth it coming all the way up. It's breezy at the top here. Now, this is one of the only protected by law in government, in Parliament, views. So in the far off distance, right in the centre, nobody can build anything which is seen on the riverbank. And there we have it. I thought that was quite interesting. I thought it was a nice place to come. I hope you enjoyed it. I did love doing that. The walk up the hill, whew, when you're holding something and you're trying not to breathe heavily, was a bit tricky, but I really, really did my best there for you, and I hope you enjoyed it. And now I'm going to pop to the West End, and I'm doing a little tour in the West End along the Strand. I think that's at 3:30 this afternoon. And I will see you later. And thank you so much for any contributions. It does help preparing them, and it does keep me going. So I appreciate all of that. Thank you very much. And I will see you a bit later. Thank you.